Okay, good evening, friends. Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Haba. We're continuing in Maseches Nedarim, Daf Hashavua, Daf Tezayin, Amud Aleph. The Mishnah said if somebody swore that they're not going to sleep, they're not going to speak, they're not going to walk, asr, karban loy oichalach. That which I'm not going to eat from you should be a karban. Ha karban. Where I swear by the life of a carbon that I'm not of what I'm going to eat from you. Loy carbon loy oichalach. What I'm not going to eat for you should not be a carbon. Not a carbon. What I'm not going to eat from you, mutter, it's permitted. Says the Gemara, mani masnisen. Who does the Mishnah go in accordance with? Rabbi Meir here. It must be Rabbi Meir, because we know that Rabbi Meir holds that if a person says carbon oichalach, then it's chal. So if it says like this, the Mishnah says ha karban sha'oichalach mutter, but karban sha'oichalach would be aser. Meaning, who's the Mishnah going like? It says the problem is because you said ha karban, but if you would have said karban, then it would have been chal. So that has to be like Rabbi Meir. Di Rabbi Yehuda, because if it's Rabbi Yehuda, loy shani le karban, loy shani le ha karban. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no difference between karban and ha karban. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even if you say karban, it's not going to be chal unless you say ki karban. So that's how, if you look, the Perush called Rashi, which is not Rashi, he says the hachaloik tani del have a mutter ella hakarban shaichalach v'loy karban. That's like Rabbi Meir. That's how Rashi seems to learn. Okay, so it's Rabbi Meir. Di Rabbi Yehuda loy shani le karban loy shani le hakarban. Ema seifa, say the seifa, le karban, loy oichalach, mutter. If you say la karban, loy oichalach, it's mutter. Aiva tnan, but we learned in the Mishnah, la karban, loy oichalach, Rabbi Meir oiser. Rabbi Meir asers, and what's the reason? Va'amar Rabbi Abba, nase ka'omer. It comes as if you said, la karban yehei, it should be a karban, therefore loy oichalach. The Mishnah says, which the Gemara and the Havamina feels there's no difference between the loy karban and la karban, and it says loy karban loy yoichalach mutter, but we know that Rabbi Meir holds if you say la karban loy yoichalach, it's aser. Says why? Because nase ka'imar la karban yehei lefikach loy yoichalach. Says Gemara like kasha, it's not difficult. Hada amar la karban. When is it effective if you say la karban? Hada amar loy la karban. To loy lahave karban ka'amar. That it's not a karban. So if you say la karban loy yoichalach, means it should be a karban and therefore I'm not going to eat from you. But if you say loy karban loy yoichalach, you're saying it should not be a karban. La karban means it should be a carbon. Loy carbon is it should not be a carbon. Hada amar loy carbon, do loy have a carbon kama. Okay, we had this numerous times already. Says the Mishnah, Shvua loy oichalach. Shvua. A shvua. Loy oichalach. And I'm not going to eat what belongs to you. Ha shvua. Ha shvua means herein, there's a shvua of what I'm going to eat from you. Now, maybe it means that you're saying, by the life of a shvua, which, that doesn't make any sense. There is no such expression by the life of a shvua. You can say by the life of a karban, but you can't say by the life of a shvua. Or, la shvua lo yoichalach, not a shvua, and I'm not going to eat from you. Asr, you're asr. Says the Ran in the Mishnah. Shvua lo yoichalach, ha shvua she'oichalach, li shvua lo yoichalach asr. Mishum de shvua lo yoichalach. You know what shvua lo yoichalach means? Masha b'shvua lo yoichalach. by a shvua, with the shvua, I'm not going to eat from you. The hashvua sha'oichalach mashma. That's mashma. Okay, that's the first halacha. The hashvua sha'oichalach, and the next case of hashvua that I'm going to eat from you, hachi mashma. This is what it's mashma. Meaning, hashvua sha'oichalach is mashma, that with the shvua of what I'm going to eat from you. The lekal of rushe lishna the chaye shvua, you can't explain that it means by the life of a shvua kamar. Kid amrinon chay karban. Nobody talks that way. Nobody says by the life of a shvua. You could say, I swear by the life of a karban. You can't swear by the life of a shvua. Shvua doesn't have a life. Ula shvua loy oichal. And the expression of shvua loy oichal nami, afilu belamed psucha aser. Even with a lamed, with a patach, it's aser. La shvua loy oichalach. So what does that mean? La shavua loy oichalach. Either loy shavua loy oichalach or la shavua loy oichalach. Diafagav the lamed psucha loy mashma. Even though lamed psucha is mashma not. Umasnisin Rabbi Meir he, and the Mishnah's Rabbi Meir, the lesson meklal avat hashemehin. That's only by a neder we say meklal lav atashemehin. But by a shvua, Rabbi Meir would say miklalav atashemehin. Now, what's the miklalav atashemehin? Loi shavua, it should not be a shvua, that which I don't eat from you. That implies that which I do eat from you should be a shvua. So now the $1 million question: why in the world, if you said what I'm not going to eat from you should not be a shvua, which implies what I am going to eat from you should be a shvua, why should that be also? This is Rabbi Meir who holds that we don't say miklalav atashemehin. We've said throughout the Masechta, Rabbi Meir doesn't subscribe to miklalav atashemehin. The answer is Rabbi Meir only doesn't subscribe to it by mamain. Or isser that has mamain. Like a neder. A neder is the chevtza is aser. So we're dealing with monetary law, or monetary law that has isser. But shvua is pure isser. Pure isser, Rabbi Meir subscribes to miklal avat hashemehin. Look in the Ran. We're now doing an unauthorized Ran. What does that mean? Even though the Daf Hashavua does not demarcate the next Ran, we're still doing it. Okay. V'nira be'inai, dahainu taima. It appears in my eyes, this is the reason. Misham daha maskinam b'sayv shvua sa'idos. That we conclude in the end of shvua sa'idos t'chi lesle Rabbi Meir miklal avat hashemehin. When does Rabbi Meir not subscribe to miklal avat hashemehin? Hani mili b'mamayna. That's by money. Inami bi'isura de'ispe mamayna. Or isser that has money. Avol bi'isura greda. But if it's just isser, islay. Now listen to this. Nedarim isura de'ispe mamayna ninu. Nedarim is iser because lo yachel devara, you can't violate the neder, but it has mamoin mishum delay mishkaches b'loy chefza. You can have an iser neder without an item that's aser. The inon chalin al davar shem by mamish. It does not devolve on something that is not substantial. Therefore, it's chal on a chefza, that's called mamoin. If it's chal on an entity, it's called mamoin. Avol shvuos inon ela isura greda. Shvuos is only iser. Shuchal begufay, v'kivan the isura greda ninu. Since it's only iser, afilu Rabbi Meir moided armin b'hu miklal avat hashemehin. Even Rabbi Meir would subscribe to miklal avat hashemehin. Okay. Let's see the Gemara. Says the Holy Gemara. This is an amazing Gemara. Now, let's go back to the case. We said, Shvua loy oichalach, ha shvua she oichalach. Miklal, da ha shvua she oichalach, da loy achel na mashma. This is mashma. behold, a shvua of what I'm going to eat from you, meaning I'm answering with a shvua of what I'm going to eat from you, means that I'm not going to eat it. Meklal daha shvua shoichalach shoichalach means I'm not going to eat it. Or aminu, I'll ask you a stira. Why? What's a stira? Shvuos shtayim shein arba. Shvuos are 2 that are 4. What does that mean? The pasuk says that by shvuas bitoy, it says nefesh kisi shava levate bisvasayim lehara oy lehetiv lechalasha yevate adam b'shvua. So you look at the pasuk, and it's talking about 2 things. It's talking about something lahara, evil, and lahetiv, good. The guy's swearing something he's going to do that's bad, and something that he's going to do that's good. What does that mean? Something bad and something that's good. So something bad means negative. I'm not going to do something. Something positive means something I'm going to do. But it's really shtayim shehin arba. Why is it shtayim shehin arba? Because not only is it something I'm not going to do and something I am going to do, but it's also something I didn't do, something I did do. So the pasuk literally is talking about things in the asid, but it's also referring to what the guy said that he did or did not do. And that's learned out of a drasha. So it's shnayim shehim arba. So what are the shtayim shehin arba? Namely, sha'oichel v'shalo yoichel. Sha'oichel and shalo yoichel. Those are the shvuos that the pasuk is talking about. Sha'achalti v'shalo yachalti, that I did eat and I didn't eat, are what we learn out from a drasha. Now, midika amar shalo yoichel, So, from the fact that it says shaloi oichal, like what's the lashon? It says she oichal v'shaloi oichal, she achalti v'shaloi achalti. So it says midikama shaloi oichal. It says I'm not going to eat. She achalti I ate. V'shaloi achalti I didn't eat. So then what does she oichal mean? She oichal means I will eat in the future. That implies that the first terminology of sha'oichal means that I am going to eat. That positively, that I'm going to eat. So how could you say, ha shvua sha'oichalach, means I take an oath that I'm not going to eat. She'oichal means I'm not going to eat. It's positive, not negative. In our Mishnah, we're interpreting ha shvua she'oichalach as this is a shvua that I'm not going to eat. I swear on that which is going to be eaten, meaning I swear I'm not going to eat. But here we see she'oichal means I'm not going to eat. So Abaye says a whopper of an approach. Says Abaye, sha'oichel shtei lashonis mashma. Sha'oichel means 2 things. Sha'oichel means 2 things. Sha'oichel means 2 things. What are they? Hayu misarvim v'lechal. If they were pressuring him to eat. V'amar, achilna, he said, I'm going to eat. V'su shvur sha'oichel. And then he says, I swear I'm going to eat. Da'achilna mashma. It means he's going to eat. And that's what this Mishnah in Shvus is talking about. But our Mishnah, av amar lo yachilna, but if he says, I'm not going to eat, v'su amar shvur sha'oichel. And then he says, a shvur that sha'oichel, that means the lo yachilna mashma. That means I'm not going to eat. So, presumably, what this is talking about is the default meaning of sha'oichel is I'm going to eat. However, if they were pressuring him to eat and he said I'm not going to eat, Shavua sha'oichel, then we interpreted sha'oichel based on what his original statement was, namely that I'm not going to eat. Our Mishnah then must be talking about Hashvua sha'oichelach is where he first said I'm not going to eat. Okay, so now that's one approach. That is one possibility of the meaning over here. Rav Ashi Amar, sha'oichel d'shvua, when our Mishnah says ha shvua she'oichel, you know what it means? She'i oichel kamar. It doesn't mean she'oichel. You read it wrong. It really says she'i oichel, that I'm not going to eat. You didn't see the yud there. It was so small, you missed it. That's what it really means to say. Okay? You missed the yud. Says the Gemara, Im Kain, Pshita, then it's obvious. If the guy swore he's not going to eat, then he's not going to eat. That's a shvua that he's not going to eat. Like, whoa, I need a mission to say if the guy swears that he's not going to eat, then it's a shvua. Says Gemara, Maldatem, I would have thought Mekam Lishnahu. It's a stumbling of speech. I would think it's a stumbling of speech. A lot of these Rans are on Tezainam at Beis. We'll read it in a second. I would think he when he said She'i oichel, he meant she'oichel. De'iskal lei. And he just stumbled. He meant she'oichel, but he just mispronounced it. He got a little bit aleph heavy. He got a little bit too much emphasis on aleph. Kamash malan, that if he said she'i oichel, he means she'i oichel. If you look in the Ran, Tezayinam and Beis, hayu misarvin b'lecha de amar achilna v'amar v'su amar shvua she'oichel de achilna masha l'fim haylish namashma de chihechi de tzarch hoich. Now, the way the Gemara says it is that you need that she'oichel could go either way, and it will depend on what he expressed originally. The Ran points out l'fim haylish namashma. The way the Gemara expresses it, it implies the chihechi de tzarch hoichach loymar de she'oichel de lo yachel namashma. Just like in what we're trying to explain in our Mishnah, that you need a positive proof that she'oichel means I'm not going to eat, then you also need a positive proof that she'oichel means I'm going to eat. The Ran points out that the Gemara in Shavuos says not like that. That the de facto meaning of she'oichel is I'm going to eat, and it means that unless you have clear indication that he means otherwise. The Ran says that this is one of the sugyos hamischalfos, that while our sugya is mashma, it could go either way. In Shavuos, it's mashma that the default meaning of she'oichel is I'm gonna eat, unless we have a clear proof otherwise. And the Ran says the ikr is like the Gemara in Shavuos. Next, Ran, miyakam lishnahu, kolaymer sheherich ba'alef. He was marach in the aleph. V'nira ka'omer she'i oichel. It sounded like he's saying she'i oichel. V'teisek adaitin, I would have think, v'teisek adaitin hachi lefi she'in derech b'nei adam lomer she'i oichel. I would have thought that since it's not the derech of people to say she'i oichel, elo shelo oichel, but rather that I'm not going to eat. Okay. So now the Gemara asks, Abaye lo amar tam kravashi. Abaye, who said that our Mishnah means that I'm not going to eat, didn't want to say like Rav Ashi that he said she'i oichel. You know why? Deloi katani she'i oichel, because the Mishnah doesn't say she'i oichel. Rav Ashi nodim in tam d'Abaye. Rav Ashi moved away from the reasoning of Abaye because Rav Ashi holds shaloi oichel nami mashma shtei l'shaynos. If you're going to say she'oichel could mean I'm going to eat and I'm not going to eat, the same thing with she'i oichel. I'm sorry, the same thing with shaloy oichal would be mashna tu l'shaynos. Namely, hayu misarvim b'lechal, if they were pressuring him to eat. You see, beforehand we were talking about where the guy said sha'oichal. Let's say they're pressuring him to eat. V'amar lo yachilna, v'amar nami shvua. And he said a shvua. If they were pressuring him to eat and he said, I'll eat. So, bein sha'omar, bein sha'oichal. And he took a shvua, whether he said, I'm gonna eat, or bein shaloy oichal. Meaning, whether he said, I'm gonna eat or not gonna eat, hadin achilna mashma da'amar. He's saying he's gonna eat. How's that possible? You have to say, here, this is a pella, where they were pressuring him to eat, and he was refusing, and then he said, lo yachilna, like a lashon bitmiya. Well, get lost. You don't think I'm going to eat? You don't think I'm going to eat? Or the gersa is explicitly, I'm going to eat. Then whether you said sha'oichal, or whether you said shaloy oichal hadin achilna mashma damar. Shaloy oichal means, am I not going to eat? It means he's going to eat. The same way sha'oichal can mean I'm not going to eat. Shaloy oichal can mean I am going to eat. Let's see the Ran on Tezayin Amud Beis. V'amar shvua shaloy oichal da'achilna mashma. Lav l'memer shei mushba sheyoichal. It's not that if he says lo yachilna, that he's taking a shvua that he's going to eat it. Elo loymar, what it means to say she'enoi mushba shaloy oichal. He's not swearing that he's not going to eat it. Dahachi amarle. This is what he's saying. V'chi nishbati shaloy oichal imcha. Am I swearing that I'm not going to eat? I already told you that I'm going to eat. So Abaye is of the opinion that if you're going to say sha'achalti means that I'm not going to eat, let's say the way Abaye was learning, they were pressuring him to eat, and he said shvua sha'oichal, and he said I'm going to eat, and then he said shvua sha'oichal, that means I'm going to eat. But if he said I'm not going to eat, shvua sha'oichal means I'm not going to eat. So just like sha'oichal means I'm not going to eat, shaloy oichal means I am going to eat in the context. And v'ikal l'trutze nami lishna shvua shaloichal, it could also mean I'm not going to eat. Namely, you could also explain if he says lo yachilna, v'ikal l'trutze nami lishna shvua shaloichal, could also be interpreted that it's I'm not going to eat. How? That if we don't have this context, meaning if he didn't say I'm going to eat, if let's say he said I'm not going to eat, or stamazai. So in other words, what's Abaye saying? That it's not mistaber to him that in the context sha'oichal could mean I'm going, sha'oichal means I'm not going to eat, because by the same token, I'm not going to eat could mean I am. So therefore, what's Abaye's point over here? What's Abaye trying to say? I guess Abaye is trying to say that it's, why would the Mishnah only say a case of she'oichel, which means I'm not going to eat? It should have also said shaloy oichel. You know, even though you could ask, well, maybe shaloy oichel would be simpler, but it should have said it both ways. So therefore, what does Rav Ashi say? Ela tana paska. Rather, Rav Ashi says that sha'oichel means one thing. The Tana said it without any qualification. She'oichel da'achel namasha. She'oichel means I'm going to eat. V'shaloi oichel lo oichel masha. And shaloi oichel means I'm not going to eat. And there's no other way to understand it. So how are we going to explain that which we said, she'loi oichel, she'achalti means I'm not going to eat? It has to be the case. So the Mishnah is she'i oichel, that I'm not going to eat. That's the case. Even though you don't see where it says she'i oichel, but that's what it has to mean. That's the only possible interpretation. Meaning Abaye is saying that you cannot interpret she'oichel means I'm not going to eat, because then you should be able to interpret shaloi oichel means I'm going to eat, and the Mishnah doesn't spell out both of those. So it must be she'oichel means yes, shaloi oichel means no. Says the Mishnah, Zeh chomer b'shvuos mi b'nedarim. This is the chumrah of shvuos over nedarim, namely that a shvuah is chal on davar she'en by mamish. What's a chumrah of nedarim over shvuos? V'chomer b'nedarim b'shvuos ketzad. Oimer koinem sukkah shani ois. If somebody says, I aser the sukkah that I'm going to make. So if you swear, it's not chal, because you can't swear not to do a mitzvah. You already swore you're going to do the mitzvah. You're muzhav b'oimed mehar sinai. But if you aser the sukkah that you're going to make, now, this is very difficult, because you're making a neder, an iser koinem on the sukkah you're going to make. There is no mitzvah to make a sukkah. The mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah. So most learn it's going on the yeshiva, because since the Torah speaks about the yeshiva, b'lashon asiyah chag hasukkos taseh lecha, so it's going on the asiyah of a sukkah. So a shvuah is not chal on a dvar mitzvah, but a neder is chal on a dvar mitzvah. Lulav sha'ani noitel, or someone asers the lulav that he's going to shake. Tefillin shani maniach, the tefillin that I'm going to place. B'nedarim aser, by nedarim it's aser. B'shvuah it's mutter, by shvuah it's mutter. Why? She'ein nishba and lavar ala mitzvahs. We do not swear to violate a mitzvah, because you're mushba v'oimed mehar sinai. Now, the Ran, for some reason, the last Rans on the page are explaining the Gemara earlier. Let's just see that. Mani masnisin Rabbi Meir. Deloi shani le carbon, deloi shani le kik carbon. According to Rabbi Meir, there's no difference between carbon and kik carbon. Deloi by kaf adimyan. You don't need the kaf to eat Rabbi Yehuda. If it's Rabbi Yehuda, my area carbon loy oichalach deshari. Why would it have to say carbon loy oichalach is mutter? Afilu carbon she'oichalach nami shari. Even carbon she'oichalach should be mutter. I mean, the Ran learns differently than what we said Rashi says. Rashi learns the raya is from ha carbon she'oichalach is mutter, but that's mashma carbon she'oichalach is aser. That only fits according to Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to say kik carbon. But the Ran learns it's from the third case. The third case is, why in the third case, carbon loy oichalach? Why does it have to say the Ran learns that it's from the first case? Why would it have to say carbon loy oichalach is mutter? Even carbon oichalach will be mutter according to Rabbi Yehuda. Hada amar le carbon, hada amar la carbon. Here the Ran has a little bit of a different gersa than our Gemara. The difference is not between la and loy, but rather between li and la. Kolamer belamid shvas mashma le carbon yehei. If you say li carbon, it means it should be a carbon, I'm not going to eat it. Ava la carbon belamid pesucha mashma loy carbon. Okay, Rabbi say we'll hold it over here, and we'll see you Be'ez Hashem tomorrow night, same time. Hatzlacha Rabbah. Have a beautiful evening. Kol Tov. Shkayach.